Coming up on Lawmakers, House Speaker Glenn Richardson testifies about his property tax proposal. Senate Democrats announce what they call sweeping reform of foreclosure. And it's homeschool day at the Capitol. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, advocates of the brain train lobby legislators.
And it's the end of another legislative week. We'll take a look back and talk with Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com.
But first, our top story tonight, property tax reform. House Speaker Glenn Richardson lays out his plan for tax reform in Georgia before a subcommittee of House Ways and Means. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us now with more. Sandra.
In Wandy, it was the first time the Speaker has testified on his plan this session, formerly known as the Great Plan. He says it has a new resolution number and is simply being called property tax reform.
So what I'm going to present to you today will wind up being a $422 million tax cut over the next 3 years for property taxpayers in Georgia.
Richardson spent 3 hours explaining in detail parts of H.R. 1246. It includes the elimination of ad valorem taxes on all personal vehicles starting next January, as well as the school portion of property taxes beginning in 2010.
The state would send a check to the county for that exact amount of money as if the taxpayer had paid it, so that no school district will get 1 penny less than exactly what they charge for the tax bill as if the homeowner paid it.
In exchange, everyone would pay a 4% sales tax on consumption charges, including groceries, lottery tickets, and consumer services.
We do not propose to tax business-to-business services. We do not propose in those personal services to tax medical services. We do not propose to tax child care services. And we do not propose to tax education services.
He says if the plan doesn't work out, it would sunset in 3 years.
If collecting taxes on groceries, lottery tickets, and on personal service doesn't work, this constitutional amendment will sunset on December 31st, 2012. And the only way it'll be renewed is if the General Assembly, prior to December 31st, 2012, reenacts it. We will know if the revenues are coming in well before December 31st, 2012.
Education officials remain concerned about the plan.
The schools were promised dollar for dollar for the QBE formula and didn't get it. On what basis do we trust that dollar for dollar they'd be promised the homeowners tax relief grant and get it? That's the basic concern.
Some of the concerns are the long-term budget impacts that this may entail. The Speaker's talking about an $830 million hole in the budget in the year 2011. To put an example of what that means, that's about 1/7, 1/8 of the education budget. It's about 1/3 of the Medicaid budget, and it's about 1/3 of what we spend in the Department of Corrections. So it has some serious budget impact out in the out years when this is fully implemented.
Now, it's expected that Richardson's plan will be amended onto a Senate resolution that passed this week, freezing property assessments. Today's subcommittee is expected to take up H.R. 1246 again next week. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thanks so much for that update, Sandra.
Senate Majority Leader Tommie Williams took the well this morning to promote the need for Cancer Treatment Centers of America coming to Georgia. He expressed his displeasure with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce's position against this for-profit center, which Williams says could bring business and resources to Georgia.
Now, how could the Chamber of Commerce take such a position? They're supposed to be about commerce. They're supposed to represent people who want to come to Georgia and spend money and pay taxes and create jobs, not protecting nonprofits who happen to be powerful and represented by people in the hall on the chamber board. Folks, when we let the folks in the hall use the Chamber of Commerce to dictate policy in this chamber, we're wrong. 10 years ago, the chamber endorsed a venue shopping bill, which is completely anti-commerce. They've lost their mission. Especially when it comes to giving Georgians a choice about where they go for cancer treatment. I don't care how you vote. I don't care how you vote in committee. But I do care when the Chamber of Commerce opposes businesses coming to Georgia. And I do care when people who are dying of cancer have to travel to Tulsa to get some help. We need to wake up and make up your mind based on what your people want at home. And 80% of your voters want another choice.
Now, we contacted the Georgia Chamber about this issue soon after adjournment, but have not yet received a response to the senator's comments.
Earlier today, a number of Senate and House members unveiled a package of bills to combat what they call the foreclosure crisis in Georgia. Lawmakers Bridget Snapp joins us from the Capitol with more. Bridget.
And Wandy, according to statistics released at today's press conference, foreclosure rates in Georgia are at an all-time high, mostly due to the failure of subprime mortgages. Senator Emanuel Jones said Georgia ranked 7th in the nation last month for the highest foreclosure rates and called the situation a catastrophe of titanic proportions.
This is the greatest foreclosure crisis, mortgage crisis, since the 1930s. It's unprecedented in the history of this country for the last 70 years. And that's why I have put together a piece of legislation which would, in fact, reinstate the strong 2002 law.
The Fair Lending Act cracks down on lenders who loan money to people without regard to their ability to repay the loan. It also ensures tougher assignee liability and underwriting due diligence. Other bills previewed would increase the notice period for foreclosure proceedings, crack down on those who attempt to influence appraisers, and increase the homestead exemption, among others. The experience of 54-year-old Nisa Jones illustrates the problem. A DeKalb County homeowner for 26 years, Jones received 2 loans from Greenpoint Mortgage Funding Incorporated that representatives at Legal Aid said should never have been extended.
So I went to try to get a fixed mortgage, which I thought this is what I was getting, and for some reason, instead of the broker taking my Social Security award letters, he increased my income to $3,900 a month. Plus, he said I had an extra $50-some thousand in the bank somewhere in adjusted, savings, which I didn't. I only had $633 a month for myself and my disabled daughter. And from there on, my problem started.
Several at the press conference said to take action immediately if you receive a notice of foreclosure. A list of HUD-approved housing counseling agencies are available at www.hud.gov, and you can also call 888-995-HOPE for help. In addition to the website info number just provided, you can also contact your local legal aid office for assistance. The bills previewed in today's press conference are expected to be introduced in the coming weeks. Reporting live, I'm Bridget Snapp for Lawmakers.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. And the Senate passed 7 bills on the floor today, 2 sponsored by Democrats. One, sponsored by Senator Kasim Reed, establishes ethics panels. The other, explained by Senate Democratic Caucus Chair Tim Golden, creates a Made in Georgia program.
I have to cite 3 groups that were the nucleus behind starting this bill, and that's the Georgia Forestry Commission, the Georgia Mining Association, and the Georgia Traditional Manufacturers Association. These 3 groups brought this idea to me, and the reason being is we wanted to highlight manufacturing and the importance of it in Georgia. While we've lost 100,000 plus jobs in the last 10 years, 13,000 just the past year, manufacturing is still nonetheless a very important part of our state's economy, employing over 431,000 Georgians. That's 10%, over 10% of the workforce in Georgia. Manufacturing is still a vital component of Georgia's economic well-being and part of our economy.
The Senate unanimously passed SB 359 as well as Senate Bill 417, which Transportation Committee Chair Jeff Mullis says will create benchmarks for DOT construction projects.
This legislation requires the Commissioner of DOT to develop and publish benchmarks based on the type and scope of the construction projects that is detailed in a realistic time frame for completion of each stage of the project, and to report that to us. Now listen, can you imagine that? That transportation projects will now be put on a fast track to be completed in a reasonable time frame, and if there's a problem with that time frame, to let us know what's going on. Well, this bill does that.
The Senate then passed legislation that updates current organ donor laws. Senator Don Balfour explains.
In the United States and the state of Georgia, there are many cases where people pass away, and there's unfortunately, if you don't have this set up correctly, if you don't simplify it, if you don't put the verbiage in here correctly, it may be hard or impossible to harvest some of these organs to be used for a positive purpose. And so this will update the current law and be very helpful to citizens in Georgia.
Other bills of note that passed the Senate today include S.R. 819, a firearms law study committee, and S.R. 859, a constitutional amendment to repeal $250,000 of ad valorem taxes. The Senate did vote to table SB 420 from Senator Chip Pearson, which exempts the Department of Transportation and its contractors from penalties when provisions regarding soil erosion and sedimentation are violated.
The House today passed a bill to bring state motor vehicle standards in line with federal laws. Representative Johnny Floyd was asked about why fees would be charged every time someone takes a driver's license exam.
Students come in to take the test that are not prepared. They go back, they come right back, take the test again, and flunk the test again. That's trying to get them to prepare themselves for the test.
So if someone does fail, will they pay a fee again when they
Right, they'll have to repay a fee.
House Bill 1111 passed by a vote of 153 to 3. The House also agreed to limit the health professionals who can issue temporary handicap car tags. Representative Chuck Sims sponsors HB 961.
This bill was brought on to me on behalf of a young man by the name of Andrew Davis, who's in the audience today, and several other people that have had disabilities and have an extremely hard time parking when people are abusing the temporary parking passes that they receive from their doctors or from different people that basically can either give or not give these parking permits. The only people now that can actually give these out are licensed doctors, osteopathic doctors, podiatrists, and optometrists. Also, if you'll look on the same page, you'll see that the front and back of the surfaces shall be laminated to prevent alteration.
House Bill 961 passed without opposition. It now moves to the Senate. Well, we'd like to recommend a valuable website that we use here for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website's a great research tool that we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
Well, it's the end of another legislative week. That means it's time to talk with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. And I began by asking him about the two tax reform bills that passed the Senate earlier this week.
One of the bills that the Senate passed would basically say that for every homeowner, the assessed value of their house would stay at its 2008 level until the house is sold to someone else. It's a way of protecting homeowners from unpredictable rises in their property tax assessments. The other bill is a little more far-reaching. It would address both residential and non-residential property, but the basic concept is the same. It would freeze the valuation where it is now and would only allow it to rise 2 or 3 or 4% a year to sort of keep up with inflation. It's a way of holding down large increases in property taxes, which is one of the main reasons people are often unhappy with the property tax bill that they get from their county each year.
Now, Speaker Richardson was talking about tax reform going back as far as last session as something he's really going to be pushing. But with these Senate bills coming across and his great plan losing a little bit of traction, what do you think he's going to be doing when these Senate bills come to the House?
Well, he's still going to push for his own bill. In fact, he is in front of the House Ways and Means Committee, David, as we speak, talking to them about the latest version of his tax plan. He started at 1 o'clock this afternoon. It's now more than 2 hours later, and he's still in there talking it up and answering questions about it. So he will still push very hard for his tax plan, although it is much smaller and less expansive in scale than it was when he first introduced it last year.
One of the big issues early on this session was water. We saw it passed, signed by the governor, but a few senators have been making a little noise about getting legislative oversight into this plan.
There are still some concerns from legislators, particularly who live downstream outside the metro Atlanta area, that the metro Atlanta may try to grab their water, and they want to make sure that there's a sharp legislative eye on what happens as we go forward to make sure that downstream cities like Columbus will still be getting their fair share of the water, no matter what future droughts may bring in terms of restrictions. So I think there's a lot of nervousness from lawmakers who live outside Atlanta, and you're going to continue to see that nervousness as we move along on this issue.
Now, how we spend our money is always a very big issue. It's something Senator Rogers tried to bring up last session, and now there's a House resolution from Representative Tom Graves, which really kind of puts priorities on how we spend our money.
That's right. It would say that whenever you have a surplus in the budget, you could only spend it on three things. First, it would have to go to the schools to pay for unexpected increases in enrollment. Secondly, I believe it would have to go into the state's reserve fund to make sure the state had at least a reserve equal to 8% of the previous year's revenues. Any money that was left over after that would have to be rebated to taxpayers in the form of a refund or a tax rebate. So it would really, in a very indirect way, put some limitations on how the state spends its money, and would try to ensure that Georgia taxpayers would get a bit of a tax rebate or a bit of a tax refund in those years where the state's economy is doing so well that they're collecting more money than they thought they would.
On that same note, there have been some changes and bills dealing with how the lottery goes about using their money when it comes to pay raises and things like that.
That's right. The House, I think, took up some legislation this week that would both expand the number of members on the state lottery board, and I think there was also a resolution they were debating that would urge lottery board members not to give themselves such big pay raises. That's something that doesn't sit well with a lot of legislators. Even though the lottery has done very well and it has raised a lot of money, there's still some bad feelings.
With the little time we have left, I'd like to talk about why we may not see gator heads on Georgia license plates.
The issue of Florida gator license tags. Eric Johnson, very concerned about the fact that if you're a University of Florida alumnus, you can get a specialty tag in Georgia for the University of Florida, but if you're a University of Georgia alumnus living in Florida, it's a lot more difficult to get a specialty tag for Georgia down there. What he is trying to get is reciprocity. Basically, whatever we do for Florida fans in Georgia, Florida should do for Georgia fans living down there.
All right, well, I'm sure dog fans will be happy about that. Tom Crawford, CapitalImpact.com. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Well, even in a 4-day legislative week, there's always plenty of Capitol action. Here's a look back at this week in the General Assembly. On Monday, Savannah senators remembered the victims of the Dixie Sugar Refinery explosion and urged their colleagues to get the statewide trauma system up and running.
And this reminds me again that we all need to be reminded, trauma care. The money is desperately needed to stay in trauma care.
It's time to put some funding mechanism into place. We have the governor's super speeder bill in the House. The Speaker and the Governor have come to an agreement on that. I urge them to act quickly and pass that over.
The House voted to allow courts to order DNA testing in order to legitimate children born out of wedlock.
The benefit is to this, is to try and bring together fathers and these children.
And South Fulton Representative Sharon Beasley Teague responded to charges that she had filed fraudulent expense and campaign disclosure reports.
Hopefully, I'm able to submit the paperwork that they'll be able to understand, and they'll make a decision on that.
On Tuesday, the Senate approved 2 constitutional amendments to freeze property taxes on residential and commercial property.
So if your home is valued at $100,000 and they reassess it at $150,000, the homestead exemption goes up $50,000 automatically. So in essence, it freezes the property taxes until you sell the home.
Much of what the senator from the first said is also found in Senate Resolution 796, but this would actually freeze property assessments at the 2008 value for residential and non-residential property and allow the residential property to grow at 2% per year and allow the non-residential property to grow at 3% per year.
Make no mistake about it, I'm not gone. I intend, as long as I am in this position, to do everything in my power to end property taxes and go to a system of consumption taxes.
Even while acknowledging that his great plan tax proposal to replace all property taxes with sales tax would have to be scaled back this year, House Speaker Glenn Richardson immediately indicated his intention to add to the Senate plans.
You only freeze values, but you don't cap the millage rates. You've really not done nearly enough.
The Senate Public Safety Committee passed a measure aimed at getting illegal immigrants off Georgia roads. Senate Bill 25 creates a felony charge for those who use false documents to obtain a driver's license and goes after those who knowingly assist them. Senate Public Safety also passed Senate Bill 430, allowing the legally obtained DNA of suspects to be entered into the statewide and national DNA databases. Yesterday, Georgia Supreme Court Chief Justice Leah Ward Sears asked legislators to approve a judicial pay raise during the annual State of the Judiciary address.
Other than 4 cost of living increases, Georgia's judges have not received a pay raise since 1999, almost a decade ago. And when you adjust for inflation, the purchasing power of a Supreme Court justice is 17% less than it was in 1999.
I hope that they will know that we're not going away and that we will continue to insist on more reforms.
Legislators who want to amend the statewide water plan signed into law by Governor Perdue on February 6th gathered at the Capitol to unveil an effort to undo parts of the plan. And that's a look back at this week under the Gold Dome.
Senator David Schaefer introduced legislation today to combat cigarette smuggling. Now, this measure requires the Department of Revenue to implement a digital cigarette tax technology to combat this smuggling and tax stamp counterfeiting. Schaefer adds that Georgia is losing over $20 million annually from this operation and that this money instead goes towards organized crime, Islamic terrorism, and communism.
Mental health advocates pushed for better care for Georgians living with mental illnesses at a press conference held outside the Capitol today. Caroline Nyaga has more.
It's time. We need to help battle the challenges and stigmas of mental illness. Everyone here is a vital part of that team, and I'm proud to know that we can count on one another's support. Thank you and God bless you.
The GBI has partnered with the Georgia Sheriff's Association and the Georgia Chiefs Association to have a law enforcement training program. It's called Crisis Intervention Team, and this program trains law enforcement officers on how to handle persons in psychiatric crisis.
There are 3 things that we're talking to legislators about. One is we want unrestricted access, and secondly, we want continuity of care. Finally, we want to continue with the crisis intervention team training.
After the speakers, supporters of NAMI held a rally advocating mental health legislation. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Caroline Nyaga.
And the Georgia Brain Train Group also rallied outside the Capitol this afternoon to show their support for commuter rail construction all around metro Atlanta. Lawmakers Mina Hosseini has the story.
Georgia Brain Train would stop at 12 locations in Georgia, including Athens, Atlantic Station, Tucker, and Emory University. Several Georgia legislators came out to show their support at the rally.
It is time to stop studying. The brain train has been studied long enough. We've spent enough money and resources figuring out something we already knew, that sitting in traffic doesn't work, that we need alternatives that are safe, that get cars off the road and get our people to work. And I plan on taking the well today on Brain Train Day at the Capitol to discuss that very problem.
The student branch of the Georgia Brain Train will feature a float at their homecoming parade later today at Georgia State University to show their support for better commuting in Georgia. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Mina Hosseini.
Homeschoolers from across the state got a hands-on civic lesson under the Gold Dome today. Lawmakers Keosha Jackson reports on Homeschool Day.
Today was Homeschool Day at the Capitol. Several homeschool students and their parents toured the Capitol to learn about the legislative process. Parents and students also shared why they believe homeschooling is the best option.
I like homeschooling because you get done, but I like public school because you have all your friends around you.
Your mom is your teacher?
It's a really good experience, and it's nice.
I thoroughly enjoy homeschooling, getting to know my children, their individual learning styles, getting to know that what they like to do as far as activity, and we can take field trips if they like. We go out and do scouting. We're involved with extracurricular sports, and our church, we're very involved. There's many different organizations as far as co-ops offered to homeschools now, where they can develop many interests and have other teachers other than their mother.
Mary Jo Patterson of the Georgia Home Education Association touched on House Bill 969, a measure that could change driver training requirements for homeschool students.
HB 969 was introduced by John Lunsford, and what it entails is that homeschooling parents can use whatever curriculum they choose to teach driver education as long as it meets certain state requirements, and we think that's a very good idea.
HB 969 passed the House today by unanimous vote. It now goes to the Senate. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Keosha Jackson.
We at Lawmakers always strive to be responsive to our viewers, and tonight we'd like to take a moment to address a concern raised by a viewer about a report that we aired on Tuesday. Keosha Jackson reported on a rally held by American Bikers Active Towards Education, or ABATE, that took place at the Capitol. At the end of the story, Keosha appeared as a passenger on a motorcycle, and neither she nor the driver were wearing protective headgear. The segment was filmed on a closed street, however, that was being monitored by law enforcement, but our viewer was correct. They should have been wearing helmets. So just as a reminder, all motorcyclists should wear a helmet in compliance with Georgia law. We always appreciate hearing from our viewers and invite your comments to lawmakers@gpb.org.
The House today welcomed the only man to have been elected to all three branches of state government. A former Supreme Court Justice, Lieutenant Governor, and House Speaker George T. Smith was at the Capitol to celebrate the 100th anniversary of his alma mater, Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College.
I told somebody this morning over at the Senate, this is a true story, that we were down here celebrating ABAC's 100th anniversary. And they asked me if I was in the first class. But I wasn't, but I was almost. We would appreciate anything you can do for us as a university, as a college. You can get an education at Abraham Baldwin College. You can any college in the state. I know I went there, and if they could teach me, they can teach you. I believe me on that. And we need your help. We need your visitation. And don't forget us in the appropriation bill. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Former Speaker of this body, let's do a little better than that.
That was a rousing applause. Lawmakers is not going to be seen tomorrow or Monday because the Georgia General Assembly will not be in session. Lawmakers returns Tuesday night at 7 with all the latest Capitol news. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in on Monday when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station. During Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette. Now stay tuned for Prep Sports Plus. That program's coming up next year on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 18th legislative day of 2008. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. Happy Valentine's Day. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday night.